Hi, my name is Ben Johnson. I'm the wing commander here at MacDill Air Force Base.
Hi, I'm Tech Sergeant Whitfield. I'm assigned to the 6th Security Forces Squadron.
And this is Lead Conversations. You ready for this?
Yes, sir, I am.
All right, I'm excited. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for the opportunity, by the way. I think it is very important for a lot of the members to be able to see our wing leadership stepping in on these conversations because they are hard conversations. It's easier for us to have them at our own level, but to be able to have that conversation directly with the wing leadership and for them to see our standpoint and kind of give us your own standpoint, I think it's going to be really helpful for many of the other members here.
Absolutely. Well, our Air Force leaders obviously recognize the importance of that, and we're really just trying to follow suit and know how important it is for all of our airmen, and ultimately, I really think for all of our mission. And when we are united, when we're strong together, our mission is more effective, and we're able to do the things the country needs us to do better.
Yes, sir.
Ultimately, so.
I definitely agree with that.
All right, who's up first, you or me?
I can go.
All right.
Do you think this movement is different from civil rights movements of the past? Why or why not?
This is a question that I've heard asked of people who lived through the civil rights movement in the 60s, and there's certainly there's a lot of comparisons, and at the same time there are things that are unique to this time. Even just as recently as this week, I was listening to someone who's kind of speaking into this space. His name is Jamar Tisby, and he was talking about, hey, if this isn't a movement, what is? You see a lot of, on the political front, social front, to a certain extent, even on the religious front, there's just a lot of activity that's trying to bring about meaningful change in a way that's on a huge scale. And it's kind of like if we don't recognize it for what it is, we're not paying attention. But I wouldn't say, it's hard to make, you can't make an exact comparison because it's its own unique time and place in history. But I think it's certainly a significant movement like that movement in the civil rights era.
I
what
agree.
about you? Yeah.
No, I agree. I want to say that I think that it is a lot similar to the civil rights movement because we look at the Kaepernick doing the kneeling for the national anthem. For some people, that was similar to the sit-ins that African Americans were doing back during the civil rights movement. So to me, I think it's very similar, but it's on a wider scale compared to the civil rights movement. That's for me.
Do you think the Air Force has issues with race?
I think indiscreetly the Air Force does. I think now they're starting to make a change, and we've seen it with the change in leadership that we're starting to have. I think the Air Force is now taking the time to get it right, because if the Air Force didn't, they wouldn't have been doing, making the changes that they're making right now. Diversity and inclusion wouldn't be a conversation. So I think the Air Force is finally realizing that they did have an issue, and they're now wanting to go back and correct it.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. I mean, I think there's something that we all cling to as airmen, and maybe it's particularly for white airmen, where we feel like, hey, we have this amazing merit-based system, and even when we do promotions, we don't see what race people are. We look at their record, and that's how people, advance in their careers in the Air Force. I think the problem is when you look across the leadership in the officer corps in the Air Force, it doesn't represent the society that we come from. And there are some statistical things that bear this out, right? And I think that's the thing that the Air Force is now being public about, rightly so, that we need to address and fix some systemic things. So one of the things that the Air Force has recently talked about was for our enlisted airmen in the first 5 years of service, the rate of Article 15s given to African American airmen in their first 5 years is double that administered to white airmen in the same time period. By the way, it was the same roughly here at MacDill when I looked into it. So, why is it that way? So, one of the things that we talk about at the command level is like, okay, so when you're mentoring young airmen and you are addressing, things that are happening in their lives and in the unit and in performance, are you responding the same way to, a young airman of the same race as you would to one of a different race, and a minority race in this case? Are they getting the same amount of mentoring? Are they getting the same amount of coaching? are they given those same kind of opportunities to bring them back to the right path? Or does it quickly accumulate a number of administrative actions so all of a sudden you're at an Article 15? Because I'm pretty confident when it gets to an Article 15, for the most part, they're going to be justified, when you peel back the cases. But it's all that things that led up to that, that I think that's where we need to engage. We need to make sure we have inclusive discussions as a leadership team when we're evaluating, okay, what do we do to help this airman who seems to be going down a wrong path? And if we have an inclusive perspective, I think the end result that we can get after that, and we can have a more proportionate kind of results in our justice system, as an example.
I think you're absolutely correct. And I think some of the issues that probably came into those issues is the fact that some people don't know how to handle people that come from, rough backgrounds, or they don't think that they can handle them. But some people don't understand, like, we all joined the same Air Force. Yeah. They got to come in the Air Force like everyone else. So they should be given the same opportunities. But some people, either they're not able to deal with conflict, or they're just intimidated, or some people, I don't know, maybe they're just not comfortable with it. But I just think it's one of those issues, is like the first thing they see is that this person to have an attitude, this person, I can't talk to them. But you actually can. I shouldn't be called in to go talk to an African-American female because of her attitude. Like, that shouldn't be the case. You should be able to talk to an African-American female the same way I talk to an African-American female.
Have people asked you to do that? Is that examples?
Yes,
sir. Yeah.
So it's unfortunate. But now looking back on it, to me, I was like, all right, whatever. Like, I do it. But, I didn't realize the issue that was, because I was just like, okay, I'll just talk to her,
Do you think they were trying to do right when they brought you in to do that? Because did they feel like maybe they weren't equipped to do it, or they like that they would offend or something?
And that's probably what it was. They probably did feel like they could offend someone, but I felt like, if you're doing right and you're doing by the book, how can you offend someone? If you're just like, hey, can we sit down and have a personable conversation, and we're talking about an attitude or something that's happening, I don't understand how you could get offended by that.
So what was so eye-opening to me is after George Floyd was murdered, we sat with a group of minority airmen, predominantly African-American, and this is the leadership team at the last base I was at. And mind you, the command chief was an African-American chief master sergeant. One of the reasons we did that, by the way, was because, he came into my office and he was like, I'm not doing well. I'm struggling and this is really hard. And so we're like, wow, if this is happening at this level and we're not tuned into it and we're not really understanding it, and not even understanding it enough to ask, what about all of our other leaders out there, particularly white leaders? If they're not asking these questions, they're probably missing something. They're probably not taking care of their airmen in the way that they need to make sure that their airmen are resilient and they're ready and they're on point, when their nation needs them most. So, how has that affected you when these things happen in the news, where we have incidents, regardless of kind of all the backstory behind them, but just when you see George Floyd killed, or Ahmaud Arbery, or Tamir Rice, or so many of the other stories that we've been through the past few years?
It hurts. Sorry. It hurts because I have a 13-year-old son that I am trying to explain. He's not wrong just for being African American. Like, you can go out and have a run, or you can go somewhere and have a play gun and just be enjoying yourself. But I have to tell my son, like, hey, you have to do everything by the book. Like, you can't have any leeway for them to mess with you. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can't give any reasons for anyone to stop you, like bother you or do anything like that, because you're more susceptible to not coming home. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's the fear that I have to tell my 13-year-old son that you're probably not going to come home if you happen to do something wrong. thing that I'm sorry, I got a phone call earlier, and it was from the school, and they were like, yeah, we had the deputies called. And I was like, why? And I was like, because your son was calling someone a name. And to my mind, I was like, you called the deputies? Because him and the kid were going back and forth calling each other a name? And I did ask the principal the question, and it was my son and a Caucasian student. And I think the part that hurt me the most is like, would you have brought him home? You know, like if something would have happened, and that's just name calling. Like that's not even going out in the streets and, you know, doing anything else wrong. So it hurts because my son is growing up in a time where he can't even be, I feel like he can't be a normal kid. I have to teach him things that he shouldn't have to learn right now. You know, he shouldn't, I shouldn't have to tell my son, like, you got to be careful when you're out at the bus stop, or you have to be careful when you're interacting with certain people, because it's a chance that you could be a Tamir Rice, you can be a George Floyd, you can be an Ahmaud Arbery. You know what I'm saying? Like, I should never have that fear in my heart, but that is a fear that that bothers me every day. And I think even with that, you know, with the military members, you know, a lot of people felt like, oh, well, you know, it's a lot of issues they saw behind it or they didn't see behind it, but me wearing this uniform doesn't protect me. You know, I'm still African American. There's other people, we're still African American. We wear this uniform and we're supposed to be brothers and sisters, but there's people that disagree and they feel like, you know, there was nothing wrong that happened to George Floyd. There was nothing wrong that happened to these members. And it's like, even as my brother and my sister in arms, you don't understand it and you don't get it. So that's the part I think that bothers me the most, is because you don't know what to expect, even in a place where we're supposed to be a family and we're supposed to be a community. So, I'm sorry.
No, nothing to apologize about.
Like I said, I feel more, I feel like the military is more of a family for a lot of us. You know, I've done my tours overseas. I protect this country like everyone else. I protect that flag like everyone else. So I don't go against it. I just go against the fact that if I'm being judged or I'm being treated differently because of my race, when overall I'm defending this country like everybody else, you know. So that's the only thing that I ask, you know, for a lot of the leaders to push out, and for all the members in the service or just people of all, we're fighting for the same flag. We're fighting for the same country. I shouldn't come in my own country and feel uncomfortable.
No.
So.
No, you're right, 100%. I'm sorry that you have to feel that way. And you're right. We're brothers and sisters in arms, and we have to care for each other in all those circumstances and be able to relate and understand and be empathetic. So we got you.
Thank you, sir.